Welcome. I'm your host, Stefano, and this is When Leaders Talk, a podcast about leadership and, most importantly, about leaders. To prepare for this interview, I have studied a bit and I have found a website that is called Women in Tech. This website, the first thing you can see on the website is a kind of a clock. And the clock is a kind of a calculation on how much time is needed for women to be equally represented in the workplace. We're talking about technology, science, engineering, and mathematics. And the clock says that at this current rate, it will take 132 years. 132 years. What it means is that right now there are very few women working in this type of jobs, and the rate is quite low. And if you consider women in leadership, it's even worse. There are even less, and they are also paid less. So women in leadership is the topic of this episode. I had the pleasure to talk about it with Alessandra Wall. Alessandra is a psychologist by training and a coach. And she actually coaches women in leadership position. We talk a lot about the culture that needs to be changed, how all the approaches that governments and companies are trying to put in place are working, but right now there is also a kind of a pushback due to pandemic and other conditions. And we will explore how different women are as leaders compared to men. There are a few characteristics. She's one that talks to them on a daily basis, so she knows what she's talking about. It's not just her. But there are a few differences. Differences that don't necessarily make women better than men. But it's just they approach things from a different point of view and with a different approach. And we talk about what is needed to have a cultural change so that not this generation, but maybe the next generations of women and men could see a more egalitarian world. Of course, it takes time. Of course, it takes effort. And of course, it takes an approach that has to start from the top, from our leaders, from the people who are in the decision, in the place where they take decisions. Well, there is a lot to unfold in this conversation, really a lot. I have appreciated a lot talking to Alessandra because she is a great professional, an amazing human being, and a person who is very easy to talk to. And as a matter of fact, when we ended the recording of this conversation, we kept talking for some time until we had to go and we had to stop. I'm sure you will enjoy this conversation then. I'm sure you will like this episode, not only if you're a woman, but if you're interested in generally speaking in to make the world a better place than you found it, like I do. Well, having said that, let me remind you that you can follow me on social networks, and also you can have more information about coaching with me on masteryourseat.com. And with no further ado, Alessandra Wall. Alessandra, it's such a pleasure to have you here. Welcome to When Leaders Talk.
Well, thank you for spending an hour, 30 minutes, however much time we're going to spend together. Thank you.
Well, it's going to be a great time. I'm sure about it. I've been reading about you, of course. I've prepared this interview. I don't have a list of questions, but I wanted to know a little bit more about you. I'm really amazed by your achievements, what you've done, what you're doing, and it's great. So that's why, when you say yes to be here as a guest, I was particularly happy, and also because you made me realize that in this podcast, I didn't have many women as guests, and I was like, And since I know how this subject, generally speaking, is important to you, you may be aware of it, and I promise I will do my best to have more women as as guests here. Well,
Well,
thank you for that.
my job is done today. That's
Yeah.
right. And if you ever need referrals for great, insightful women in leadership, you let me know. I will be happy to introduce you to a few.
Of course, and actually I do. Well, that's part of the. Normally, I leave this to the end, but yes, please. Well, let's go to our interview though, without thinking about what's coming next. And I know we were going to talk mostly about women, but I want to still start with my general question. And what is your definition of leadership, if you have any, of course?
Oh, we went over this before. My definition of leadership. First of all, I strongly believe leadership is a responsibility. It's not a prize. I believe that oftentimes the best leaders are the people who aren't vying for leadership. They just
Mhm.
step into the responsibility. And then in that context, it is the responsibility to lead one or more people to a better place, um, and to help them get there, not just by setting a vision, which I think is a lot of how we think about leadership, but also by making sure that they can execute successfully in reaching that vision. And I'm really thinking about leadership from a business standpoint, maybe even a family standpoint, right? When you think of leading in your family, you have a vision for what your marriage might look like, a vision for what your children's opportunities might look like, and you want to lead them there, which is not the same thing as forcing them to go somewhere they need to
Right.
go, and that make sure that they can execute on getting there, so they have ownership.
Yeah, and leading in a family, I think, is a very sensitive matter. It's mostly actually co-leading, right? So
Mhm.
you have the other parent, and then a lot of things have to be agreed. In a way, it is complicated because also depending on personalities, you might have some conflicts. But we don't want to. I don't want to dwell too much into the family leading because that's a complete different part. I like what you say about responsibilities and giving, leading people to a better place, being a better people, or sharing a vision with them. How do you do that? What is the let me say technique or method you use
That I
to be
specifically use?
sure, yeah, that they will be able, you will enable them to be better?
Everything starts in the way I approach my work. And honestly, I will say I believe that this is the way most leaders should approach their work, in making sure that you clearly understand what other people actually need and some of what they want. There's a mistake I see a lot in leadership, which is just to assume that you know best what other people want and to lead people where you want them to go or where you think they need to be. I have made that mistake in my career before. So at this point, the process is first and foremost to get a really good understanding with regards to what a person or a system really needs in order to be successful and have fulfillment in building that and achieving that success. The second piece where I have a skill set that works really well is being able to step back and get that bird's eye view of the larger problem. Right? So somebody says you want to go there, and the tendency is to want to be very tactical. Let's go. What's goal number one? What's goal number two? And I like to stop. And I say often, I've shared often that as a child, I had ADHD. I didn't know I did. All I knew is all my other friends, they could go to class, they could read a book, they could take a test. I would be in class and my attention would wander, and I'd sit, with my eyes like this, trying to pay attention. I would read a book and I'd have to highlight, and I would highlight so much of the book that I had to create, that I'd need to create notes. But then my notes were so copious that I had to highlight my notes and create a second set of notes.
Oh, wow.
But the way what that has helped me do, the way my brain functions, is to see the big picture, to see the structure, the strategy of something, right? And as a leader, that is, to me, a big piece of leading well. It's like you set the vision, you make sure the vision is aligned with what people need, not just what you want or what they think they want. You start establishing the framework to a strategy. And then, because I'm a psychologist by trade, you look at what the roadblocks are going to be before you ever get on the road. And roadblocks come in three ways for the people I work with, in three categories. Roadblock number one is what a lot of people think about, is the skill gap, right? What is it that you need to know in order to get to where you want to go that you don't know, or that you haven't mastered, even if you know intellectually you haven't mastered it? The second roadblock, because I work not only, but primarily with executive women at a high level, is what are the roadblocks that exist in the system? The system that we operate in, our social system, our corporate system, were designed primarily by men, and to succeed on men's terms. There's nothing wrong with that. It just is what it is. But that means that as a woman, there are a number of different hurdles, different roadblocks that need to be addressed in order to be successful. So that's the second. And oftentimes that's where people stop. But again, my background is as a clinical psychologist. So the third roadblock for me is what's internally going on that's going to keep you from moving forward and taking action. Once you have those three pieces, the vision, the framework, the roadblocks, then you can start building a plan, moving forward. And it all has to start with those three pieces, because it is, your success depends not on what you can do, but what on the people you're leading are capable of achieving.
Oh, there is a lot to take in from what you just said. I like the idea of the roadblocks, and you were describing something that it sounded to me like the military planning. I don't know. I don't want to make any comparison, but there is a lot of studying, gathering information, and understanding what are the information you're lacking, and then gather more information, and then in the meanwhile, there is also kind of the red team. They play the enemy, kind of a Roblox, if you want, and you go through the game and see what else you need, and so on and so forth. And I really appreciate this strategic view that you have to have. As you say, step back, don't rush it. Unless it's probably an emergency, you don't need to rush it. You have to take your time and time of your team to analyze everything in a more, not just rational, but you can consider all the factors, not just rational elements into this. But you have to do it slowly to a certain extent. And when you talk about roadblocks, what do you need to get over roadblocks? What do you think are the skills that you need to overcome each roadblock?
Okay, so it's context dependent, right? It depends on the roadblock. So again, if we go to the simplest level, skill gap, you need to identify what skills you're missing, identify what you're missing within that skill, right? Whether it's information or practice or things like that. And then there's a lot of practice and application. What I found, the reason I keep on referencing my background as a clinical psychologist, is the vast majority of people who came to see me when I was a therapist, and again, I would say 90%, 95% of the women I work with today, they're incredibly well read. They're incredibly well educated. They know what needs to be done. I am not teaching them anything new. But what I am bringing in is understanding how to, like, what pieces of those skill sets they're missing, what they need to develop, understanding how to apply it very specifically, right, in their spaces, and understanding why it matters to them. So that's that. The systems, how do you overcome that roadblock? Patiently and one conversation at a time.
I love that.
The way I'm trying to overcome that roadblock is I describe myself as a pragmatic or practical optimist. So I have to be an optimist. I have to believe that there's a world where women are allowed to operate as effectively as they know that they can operate, so that we're represented in a manner that is more true to who we, like, how many of us are in society and what we have to offer, where it's not threatening to men and it doesn't undermine men's ability to be really successful, right? And to also succeed. But if we run into that system and we say, it's not fair, it should be this way, you need to give me this, those things might be true. Psychologically, that's going to trigger immediate resistance. And I was just having this conversation yesterday, and I chair a committee on male allyship. And I said, I know we love saying it's not pie. It is pie. There are only so many slices. There are only so many board seats. There are only so many leadership positions. There's only one person who can be president of a country at any given point in time. It's pie. And if we invite more people to the party, well, there are one or two things that happen. Either everybody's slice of the pie gets smaller, or people who have historically had a share of pie suddenly will find that they don't get pie. And that's scary. I mean, not because people are terrible. It is like, of course it's scary. So we come into a system, and my goal is to prepare women to be as effective, as impactful as possible, to give them the skill set to build those skills on communication, on building relationships, so that when they enter the system and they start pushing against it slowly, it's done diplomatically in a manner that is going to be really effective for them and is not going to trigger immediate rebellion from the people they're pushing back against. So that's that one. And then the third one, the internal roadblocks, well, that's 20 years of being a psychologist, right?
Yeah.
But for anybody who's listening who goes, but how do I? Like, those internal roadblocks tend to be self-limiting beliefs, assumptions that you make. So step one is insight.
Right.
And everybody thinks, oh, if I just know, it'll change. It doesn't. Insight is it's a must-have. It's necessary, but not sufficient. And so the next step that comes with insight is courage and an action. So without courage, there is no action. You cannot wait for motivation to come. It will not come, or it'll take too long. So if I realize, for example, let's say one of my limiting beliefs is that I'm not smart enough. I know on paper, somebody showed me, I now have insight. Oh, this is why I'm not going for these opportunities. This is why I haven't stepped up in this leadership role. This is why I second guess myself. But I have proof now that that's not true, but I still worry about it. I still feel that way. So now when I have to make decisions as a leader, I hesitate, I second guess myself. It takes me too long, right? The next step is courage. And that courage is the courage to act despite the fear still being present. To say, if logic and data tell me I'm wrong, then I cannot operate based on how I feel. I have to operate based on what I know. And if I operated in that context, that this is what I would do, this is scary, but I'm still going to do it. And over time, by disproving the belief, you shift it.
once again,
I know
you
it's a lot.
talking. Yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot. There are many questions comes in one. I have a simple question. Have you seen the movie Barbie?
Not yet.
Not
Although
yet.
I am in hot pink today, not yet.
Yeah, I can see that. Um, okay, so there was one. I haven't seen it yet, but I'm curious about. I want to go there. Every time I try to go, it's like the movie theater is sold
Mhm.
out pretty much, or there are like front row seat that you have to watch it like this. So
Uh-huh.
I don't want to go. And this hype comes from what I'm reading, right? All those reviews, all those comments. So a couple of days ago, I was googling up, what this Barbie movie is about, or what is teaching us. And actually, there was one article, I don't remember where, that was quite critique. And it comes to what you said earlier, because at the end of the day, it's like women against men,
Mhm.
and there is a contraposition. So I don't wanna spoil anything, but what happened at the end. But I think you can imagine it's still, you have one group that prevails to the other.
Yeah.
It's a kind of there is no diplomacy in this. As I mentioned earlier, there is kind of forcing the system to accept something that is completely new.
Mhm.
And despite I guess we all agree that discrimination or opportunities, different having different opportunities for women and men is completely wrong. Still, you need time.
Mhm.
It's a cultural change, right? So we're not going to talk about the movie anymore. I don't want to really spoil it. I haven't seen it yet, so I cannot spoil it much. But I've read a lot. Um, but I have a quick question. I have a lot of things in my mind.
Mhm.
How do you? Because you say I'm a psychologist, but you're also a coach.
Yep. Actually, I no longer even practice as a psychologist. I am officially, I stopped taking new patients in August of 2020.
Okay.
I uh, I disbanded my practice in February of 2022. And this year, as a psychologist, you have to renew your license every 2 years.
Right.
And this year, I renewed an inactive status. So
Ooh.
I'm not even
That's an
licensed.
official
But
statement. Whoever is
that is an
listening.
official status. If I practiced as a clinical psychologist right now, I could get in trouble.
Okay.
Um,
But
but
let me ask you, how do you change hat? How do you understand? I mean, until 2020, of course,
mhm,
when to put the psychologist
yep.
hat and when to put the coach hat. And I guess I'm asking this because I guess many people might get confused
Mhm.
on the roles and the professions.
The psychologist hat is always on, but the practice of psychology is not what's always on.
Mhm.
Uh, my mother and always loves to say, "Oh, Alessandra, with all your education, the reason you understand these things, the reason I can have conversations about speaking up and being assertive and call her out, or the reason I'm more strategic, it's because of your education as a psychologist." And I said, nope. The reason I'm a psychologist, the reason I became a psychologist is because those values, those skills were always with me. The psychology is the application of those skills, becoming a psychologist in this industry, in an infrastructure.
Right.
So the psychologist hat is always on, meaning I'm always trying to listen for what's going on. I'm always acutely aware of the emotional communication. At this point, more so than when in my early career, I'm always very curious and trying to understand the neuropsychology of why we do the things we do. I found that when you work with people, if you can explain, why people always say smile? Because when you smile, you release dopamine, serotonin, and neuropeptides. And dopamine is a reward. Serotonin makes you feel happier, and those neuropeptides make you feel calmer. So just by smiling, you feel more rewarded, happier, and calmer, but that's chemical. It's not social.
Yeah, and nothing has changed, until
And
in
the
the last.
people who see you smile, they feel the same way.
There you go.
So when I tell my clients, I need you to practice smiling more, it's not you look so much prettier when you smile. Smile. It's this is a tool, right? And it's a tool that will actually make you feel better. And evolutionarily, it's a response that we have devised to trigger a trust response in others. So that hat never goes away, right? That understanding why we do the things we do and really thinking about why we don't do the things we know we should do. What's different between being a coach and a psychologist, actually, the reason I wanted to shift careers is psychology is very slow. It is a process of unveiling and uncovering. A lot of people who come into therapy are actually more looking for insight, when what they need is to be moved from insight to action. But also psychology is, in the States at least, is about taking people from a place where they're not functioning well back to baseline functioning, maybe slightly better. But coaching is you take somebody at their baseline and you move them to a higher, better, more effective level. Coaching is about optimizing what each individual human is capable of doing so that they can achieve more of what they want sooner, better, with less stress. And so it's all action oriented. Today, if I meet a client who, when I'm talking, I realize there's your levels of anxiety around this are they're clinically significant, or there's depression here. I don't try to solve that problem for them. I will recommend that they go see a psychologist, and maybe we pause our work until they do the work, and then we can come back and finish, or we do the work at the same time. But I
That's
need them
nice.
to at least be at baseline so that I can take them to optimal.
It's a great advertisement for coaching. You say so well, and
But
I
it is
love
what we
that.
do, right?
Oh
I
yeah,
mean,
yeah, yeah,
your
absolutely.
leadership work, that is exactly what you do.
Yes, yes, that's what I do. That's what I do, and that's what I love doing. Um, what is? I'm sure you're familiar with Simon Sinek concept, the golden
I love
circle, the
it. Uh-huh.
why. What is your why?
Uh, I am very familiar. I did my work on it, and the aha was incredible. My why is I want to get people to live life with as little regret as possible. And so my how, across everything I do. So this is true for my coaching. It was true for my therapy practice. It's actually true for how I live my life, how I raise my children, how is by teaching people to take ownership of their actions and their choices. I think so many people live life defined by the circumstances of their life. When the circumstances of your life, your conditions, the system, your background, anything, they should shape you, but they don't need to define you. So when you can teach people to take ownership of their choices and their actions, you can lead them to have a life where, yeah, there are plenty of bad times and they make mistakes and they get divorced or they get into, but there's less regret.
That's beautiful. I like your why. It's strong. It's inspirational, as the why should be, right?
It's why I became, when I was a kid, honestly, and this really helped in that work, because I don't know if you've done Simon Sinek's work, but I did with the worksheet. It's lots, it's deep. But it is exactly why I became a psychologist, and why I started life as a child psychologist, because I saw plenty of kids whose lives were defined by circumstances that were completely outside of their control, including myself, right? Every therapist, has a story of their own. And it made me mad. It made me mad to watch not only the children, but the adults in these children's lives define so much of their outcome by this thing happened to us. Right? And I thought, when I grow up, I'm going to help those kids. And I did for a while. And then I moved to adults, and then I do. But it's all tied to the same work of, can I use a bad word?
Sure. Oh,
Shit happens.
oh yeah.
Shit happens. And sometimes you can't help it. But always you have a choice in how you respond to it. And I have seen enough people in my life who've had terrible things happen to them. And they're not all slumdog millionaires. But what they've chosen to do with that hardship has allowed them to live a life that is still hard, still sometimes tragic, but one where there is pride and fulfillment and ownership at a level that's completely different from people to whom the same stuff happens, who just say, well, I couldn't do anything because this happened.
Yeah, and that's like when people think I cannot do anything because this happened, it's like what is called a saboteur, like a victim. You feel like a victim of circumstances. What we don't realize is that 90% of the things that happen to us, we don't have control on them. Even if you try to make decisions, it's someone else that is impacting you, or circumstances. It can be weather, whatever, and something you cannot literally control. You can control if you want to go out for a walk. You cannot control whatever is going to happen while you walk. If it's going to rain, if a lightning is going to strike right next to you, and something else. There is no way we can control that. But I wanna bring our conversation. I love what and I love it. I love every word you're saying. But I want to bring this conversation on the main topic, that are women in leadership positions. Are women better than men in leading? Okay.
They're different. I don't know that I can say that women are better than men. There are terrible women leaders out there who are selfish and reactive and are power hungry and don't really have a vision for other people. And there are plenty of male leaders who are in that same boat. And then there are women in leadership out there who are amazing, and men who are amazing. But they're different. How we approach leadership, if I go in gross generalizations, for anybody listening going, I know that one person who, I get it. Like there's a spectrum, there's a normal curve of behavior, and women fall across that whole normal curve. Not all women are nurturing, not all women are, feminine, like are stereotypical, that's fine. But whether it's because of how we're hardwired internally or how we're raised socially, one of the things we see with women is that they, generally speaking, tend to be more collaborative leaders. They tend to use more consensus-driven decision-making. Sometimes that's the perfect kind of decision-making you need. When it doesn't work, actually, you tell me, when does consensus, we just talked about, when does consensus-driven decision-making is the most terrible form of decision-making?
It's urgencies, like yes. when you need action, immediate action.
Right?
You cannot ask.
In an active crisis that needs an urgent or emergent reaction, consensus-driven decision-making is a terrible form of leadership. Yeah. But we see more of that collaborative decision-making is present. The other thing that research is showing about women is their leadership tends to be more situational, meaning more so than men, it appears that women will change their leadership style to adapt to the situation they're facing, rather than come in and say, this is my leadership approach, therefore I will go this way.
Well, that's great.
Right? So that agility is a really good thing. The reason I can't tell you whether women are better leaders than men is because we don't have enough data. There are too few women at the top in really, really visible positions where the rest of us can watch you fail publicly and succeed publicly. For us to have a data to tell you whether women are better than men. What the little bit of data we have now says that in a crisis, women seem to be slightly better, right? That companies that are run by women or have enough women at the helm in a crisis tend to get out of crisis sooner, more smoothly.
Right, and we saw this, especially in the COVID.
Yeah.
Countries that were run by women reacted, generally speaking, of course, better than the few countries that were led by women reacted better to the pandemic compared to other countries run by men, in an average, of course, as we said.
Yep. And again, this idea that when you can up the number of women at the helm of an organization, they become more profitable. Why? Who knows? But there's this idea, right? One theory, among others, is that again, they're less reactive in their decision making, so they're making these more collective, collaborative, long-term decisions. There is value in that, the stability that brings. There's also value in what stereotypically we assign to men, which is the tendency to make quicker decisions with higher risk, right? There's a time and a place for each one.
Okay. Do you think there is an evolution in this? Have you noticed? I mean, you talk to a lot of women in leadership positions. So have you noticed kind of a changing trend into women to be able, especially as you said, not to seek for consensus when they need to take a decision? Do you see the kind of adapting to what is needed in the moment, even when it's an emergency?
I'm seeing I see that the more women are given the opportunity to lead, and the more they're given the space to lead in the way they naturally would do it, the better they become. The problem with women in leadership historically is that women have been told that in order to succeed in a man's world, they needed to show up as a guy. So, this doesn't work for us. It doesn't work for many reasons. First of all, when we show up with some of those traits in the same manner, we get massive pushback, right? So a guy can walk into a room. Oh, I'll use a leader I like, Gary Vaynerchuk.
Okay.
Do you know Gary V? Have you ever watched Gary V talk on a stage?
No.
Like even videos of him?
No.
He's crouching. He does that thing, right, where he takes up all his space. But I've seen him talk to people and he's like crouching at the front of the stage. And he exudes all that like masculine, and I mean this in a good way because he's somebody I like following, but that masculine, cocky leadership. I know my stuff. Listen to me. What you're doing is wrong. And here's what's right. And he's always talking about leading with heart. So I love the message, but the style. Imagine putting a woman and having her do that. Sit in a chair, she's wearing pants, spread her legs, spread her arms, sit back and tell everybody, this is stupid. Even just doing this for video, for anybody who's watching in video, it's a jarring image of me seated with my arms up like this. So we were told to succeed, you need to operate like men. But hey, still stay feminine. You need to stay feminine. So we'd like you to continue wearing heels, do the makeup, the hair. We're told that some of the things that make us good leaders, the connecting with people, the choice to be softer, the fact that we recognize and are willing to talk about or even show our emotions, we shouldn't do those things. On one hand, we're told to behave in ways that when we behave in those ways are going to there's too jarring for people. And then we're told that some of the things that we are naturally able to do, and societally, thank God, as women, we are told it's okay to have and show and process your emotions, that we shouldn't do that. So women have been massively handicapped and handcuffed. Women who are allowed to show up more, I think we're seeing smoother leadership. unfortunately, I think it's Melinda Gates just did a, I can't remember, I think it's her, just came up with a body of research where they were showing that to date, 91% of the population is still biased against women. This is women and men. Still think women can't lead as well as men, aren't, shouldn't be in high offices. And very often, even when women get the title, they are not granted the implicit authority that comes with that title, which allows them to have influence and impact in the right ways.
That's striking what you're saying. And actually, before the interview, I was checking this website. It's called Woman in Tech.
Mhm.
When there is a wonderful statistics, and the first thing you see on the page is how much time is needed for women to the, following the current trend, to be equal to men, both in percentage and also as a salary. And the number today was like 132 years.
Yep.
So
That's
that's
gone up, by the
how
way.
low we're going. And it's going up.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's really interesting. In the last few years, that number has gone up. It used to be slightly lower.
Oh, wow.
Mhm.
Okay. That's amazing. So are we going in the right direction, or are the men pushing back all this kind of
Um, I,
movement?
my theory is this: we're facing a pendulum swing in society. I think this is all across the world to the challenge of the status quo.
Mm.
So over the last 5 to 10 years, there's been a challenge to the status quo. And the challenge was gentle. And then George Floyd happened and COVID happened. And then the challenge got not so gentle.
Mm.
And reactively, a lot of organizations, and I'm talking private and public, so government organizations, reactively were like, oh, we need to do something. So they tried to put measures in place and force very rapid change. Some of the measures that they put in place are really good, strong, effective measures. Some of the measures they put in place look great on paper, but haven't yielded the dividends. No matter what, a segment of society has suddenly seen their way of life completely challenged. And I'm not just talking about men. I just mean like there's a segment of society. And it felt like too much, too fast. So people felt threatened. And what we're seeing is a massive pushback to that now.
Right. That's sad. This is as I said earlier, I guess that rationally each of us will agree that that, I don't know, probably but most of us will agree that that's not fair. That's not fair. And yet, as you said, there is a pushback, and we are not improving that much. And we actually were lucky because we live in a country or in countries where there is at least there is a conversation. There are movements, and there are policies, either by governments or by companies, to facilitate the integration of women in the workforce and in leadership position. But yet, that's not enough. That's not enough. What do you think we need today? What do we need to do today? I'm sure this is nothing's going to happen overnight. Rome was built in a day. It's a cultural change. But what do we need to allow this change to happen with the next generations?
I mean, the first thing is we need to stop rolling back on the changes that we've acquired, right? And that's the big thing. When I say there's pushback, I really mean there's pushback. I mean, like things that women have fought for, women and men have fought for, that they believe would make a more egalitarian society, and therefore a better society, right? We agree that it's not fair, but why do we care that it's not fair? Because those of us who can think about the impact of that unfairness can look at things and go, oh, but look at all the potential that could be built. There's a business case and there's a power case. There's a real economic case for this, for more equity. So the first thing is we need to really focus on protecting and regaining, I think, the rights and the opportunities we had. But the other piece, and I mentioned earlier that I'm co-chair on a committee for male allyship, is I don't think any of us have done a very good job explaining to men why it actually is better for them. We've done a huge case explaining why it's not fair, why morally there's a very strong case for this. We've made a decent case explaining why, from a business perspective, there are advantages to diversity in teams and thoughts, to bringing in women, different leadership styles, blah, 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 blah. There's money in it. But we haven't explained to human beings why it should matter to them. And I was thinking about this with my group. I was saying, for example, this, not saying, Stefano, that you don't care about this, but you as a man should want equal pay, because I just want you to know that your retirement, your lifestyle, your comfort is massively impacted by the fact that your wife, presumably, has access to less opportunity to earn as much as a man in her position, with her education, with her background and her experience. It's not just that it would be nice to have her because she's smart and you love her and she should, like, you're losing on this too, which means your kids are losing, and there's a lot to be said about why you should care about it. I hear a lot of men with daughters care, which is great. Gentlemen, if you have a daughter and that's your reason to care about this, it's a great start. I want men with sons to care, because maybe they don't want their sons to be drafted into wars quite as often. Women haven't started wars, men start wars, at least historically. We'll see, maybe put more women in power and we'll see how many women start wars. But right now, if there's a war and people are drafted in most conventional wars, who's going to go get shot? It's boys, it's not girls. More egalitarian world, maybe there are fewer wars. Maybe we spread the impact. Don't you want your boys' lives to be easier, for it to be simpler, for them to walk into a workspace and not have to worry about what they say, how they say it? Like if we make the world a little bit more egalitarian from a racial, from a gender, from, all those perspectives, your kids' lives are going to be so much easier.
What I see is that you're a psychologist, I'm sure you can push back what I'm gonna say for the next couple of minutes, but we do lack this kind of long-term vision. We lack it. I mean, and it's not just what you're saying, but even something that is really impacting everyone, like climate change. And even if you try to say, oh, but we're gonna live our life, but our sons and daughters, mm-hmm. and their sons and daughters, they might not have the opportunities to live on this planet anymore if we don't do this today. And yet, this is a great motivation, right? You think about it. Oh my God, it's about the next generations, and yet, it's hard, even at home, even in a domestic environment, to really see any improvement, any attention, any consideration from climate change. We look at what we want today, maybe tomorrow. I want a shower, with all the liters or gallons of water that I want. I want to fill my bathtub to the edge. I want to immerse in it. And I don't give a damn to what's going to happen in 25 years. I'm going to be, well, hopefully not that, but I'm going to be happy about the life I lived
Mhm.
in 25 years. So we don't have this long-term vision.
Well, you brought something up that's really important. You talked about it in terms of needs, but I believe it's not just needs. The problem is those long-term gains, they don't, they can't compete with our short-term needs and fears and discomfort. So you talk about bathtubs. Let's talk about air conditioning, right? Because some parts of the world have no water shortage issues, but the whole world seems to be getting a little bit hotter, and when it gets hot significantly. I don't want to sit around in a 86 degree, that's 30 degrees Celsius apartment and sweat. If I turn on AC, I can make it cooler, but AC has a huge impact on the environment too. So how uncomfortable am I willing to be for a potential future that I have not yet lived and a potential catastrophe that I'm not yet facing? And that's why I was saying, with this case, there's an immediate case to make. The world will not change if the people who hold power don't understand how this can benefit them immediately. And I would love for the moral case to be sufficient. It's not. Just because it makes you a better person is not enough to convince people to cede potential power, to have a smaller slice of that pie or no pie at all sometimes and give the piece to someone else. You got to look at, listen, this is the very personal benefit. You can't even talk about what benefits the company, because at the end of the day, who's at the head of the company? An individual, one human who has his own needs, his retirement, his kids he wants to put through college, his wife maybe who's divorcing him, and that's half of his income if you're in California that's going out of the door, right? And his pension. It's this personal, like, and when we can get more people to personally give a damn and to acknowledge that it's totally scary, it's terrifying to lose power, to have things be different, power you didn't even realize you had until you started losing it.
Right.
And that it doesn't make you a terrible human being to be scared and a little annoyed that you have to give that up. I think then we can start seeing changes.
Yeah, that's hard to see today, especially knowing that there are people, including leaders, who really don't have this vision. They clearly are not willing to do anything on this line. And the problem is not only that they don't do anything, is that they reflect the image. They influence others not to do anything, not to take action, not to understand.
Do you watch football? And I mean football, not
Uh,
not American football.
oh yeah, I do. I would,
So
you have European
so
descendants, so yeah.
yes. So in the world of football, soccer, for anybody who's American who's listening to us, historically, the European leagues have held all the power. They have the best players, the best teams, right? The best games. They have FIFA running everything. We can talk about their leadership another day. Not saying great leadership. I'm just saying they have a structure.
Well, there's a
Everyone,
beautiful documentary on Netflix about leadership and the World Cup in Qatar and Russia.
there is Central and South America, right? Other big center. And then America a little bit, Canada a little bit, whatever. And then in the last 2 years, the Middle East has been buying players, building teams, shifting the balance of power in the world of soccer. Now they're not big enough yet. I'm from France and I'm from Paris, so they're not big enough yet to be able to woo Mbappe, because they can offer him a lot of money, but they can't offer him a career with the longevity that will allow him to continue to grow. He's so young. but it's coming. And think about your internal reaction to that. Most Europeans' internal reaction to the Emiratis, the Qataris, they're buying more players. I'm like, it's just a shift in power. Maybe what will happen from that shift in power is a second massive, huge, entertaining, exciting league. But that's not what people are focused on. If you go to Europe, what they're focused on is they're offering incredible salaries and trying to steal our players. They're not our players. Half of them come from other parts of the world.
Yeah, even more than half, yes.
Right. So, but that's the same thing, right? It's a shift in the balance. And I love the example because when people get really mad about it, I'll ask them, I'm like, why are you so upset? Because you were used to having power and you want to maintain the status quo. You're not even sure that what's being created won't be better. You now have more games that you can watch, more rivalries that can be created. You're going to have these super teams that are going to do what Real Madrid did, you know, in the 90s and early 2000s, where they would build these teams with like all these super players that were because they had the money to throw at them.
Well, the Paris Saint-Germain, basically. That's
right.
what
Or
I've
the Paris
done.
Saint-Germain has been able to, right? PSG has been able to do. But I think it's a really nice analogy. It's a great place to look at why do we have those reactions, and then to realize that is the same phenomenon that you're seeing in the world, and especially in America. Let's talk about American systems with regards to bringing women into leadership. We don't know that it's bad, but it's different and it's scary. And we don't even realize why we're scary, but somehow internally it bothers us. It's only if we stop and look and go, what is this about? Oh, it's a power issue. I don't want to cede my power, right? I don't really have a good reason other than this is what I'm used to. It works well enough, right? And it's scary.
It does. I can see that. And I know, and the analogy works well, especially as being a European. I like football. I not all the Europeans, but I do. And the analogy works greatly. And yet, I like the idea of, for example, Messi playing in the United States, but not because it's the United States, but because it's somewhere else, opening up and doing something else in another country where they can create, as you said, a fun championship. They can be equally entertaining, like the Italian or the German or the British or actually English ones or the Spanish ones. I mean, and that's the beauty of it, you know. But you have to see it. You have to agree. You have to be able to, be willing to give a part of your slice or all of it or the pie to someone else, and just enjoy life, you know, and see the benefit of having diverse leaders, having diverse point of views, perspectives, and how this will bring innovation, new things, and will foster open-mindedness and a lot of things. So that's.
But and then again, you got to bring it all back to personal. And I love the idea that, you know, what if I told you you could, if you don't love your job? I happen to be one of those people who probably will never retire. But if you're dreaming, what if I could tell you, like, by making sure women can earn their living better and more fairly, you might be able to retire. If you're in a heteronormative couple, you might be able to retire earlier. And maybe all the weight of being the primary breadwinner doesn't have to be yours. Like, wouldn't that be nice to like shed some of the responsibility and the weight that comes with how are we going to pay for our mortgage, get the bills, save enough for retirement? And like that we could just share that. That personal thing it's like sales. There
is a resistance on the other side too, right? I mean, there is, and I come from a country where, especially the generation of my mom, but you know, even my generation now is decreasing. But you know, a lot of women have chosen not to work. They we're not interested in having the slice of the pie.
Right.
So this one is also, so when we talk about cultural change, is all of it. And I know we don't have time. I think we could talk about it like for another couple of hours. And unfortunately, we have just a couple of minutes, and this leave room for a last question. And actually, I want to personalize for you. And what is the suggestion that you will give to a woman who wants to be a leader nowadays? What are the advice they will give to this person to become a successful leader today?
Be clear on what you want and what your core values are, and start from there. Right? Like that, if I'm just talking about being a successful leader, once you're in leadership, do that. Because in doing that, you will make better decisions strategically for yourself and for your team. You will be much more consistent in how you present. If what I would add to that is you need to make sure you create visibility and articulate those values in that process so people understand it, because then people will trust you. And when you walk into a room and you then talk about what you want to do or a new initiative, or you share your opinion and it's contrary to everybody else's, because you have clarity on what you need and what you stand for, you can make those declarations with much more confidence and authority behind them. But also, if other people understand that about you, they will have more trust in you, and they're much more likely to be able to be willing to listen to you.
And trust is probably the main column, if you want, on leadership, building trust, having trust.
Mm-hmm.
Alessandra, thank you very much. I really hope that the people listening to this podcast will listen carefully, actually, what you said, understand the importance of having a more egalitarian workplace, having more women in leadership position, and how this is not a problem, that this is just an opportunity that we have, and we can take it. So thank you very much. Thank you for the work you do every day. And thank you for having brought a little bit of this work today with us. It's been a great conversation.
It has been wonderful. And thank you for asking really good and important questions and caring about the answer.